Friends, it's a real pleasure to be here in this pleasant place. We're right on the highest point of the historic East Hill Cemetery, and that can be said Bristol, Tennessee, Virginia. I can just scoot over and be in Tennessee, and that's where I'm sitting today. And all around me, there are stones that I could tell you stories concerning the person they memorialized. There's no shortage of information up here about this. I would never get over it in a lifetime if we had to tell all the stories that I know about this place. I came to Bristol in 1953. I landed here August the 20th, 1953 at 4 p.m. Then I stayed my first night in a little hotel down in town, and then I found out that the YMCA was renting rooms. I guess you call it the YMCA hotel. And very reasonable, they said. So I moved my worldly goods, which consisted of 2 suitcases, and moved up to that building the next day. I had a room on the 4th floor, I believe the 4th floor, on the corner of Shelby and 5th. Well, the room had big windows on both sides, and I could sit in my window and look up toward this hill, and I could see an enormous big monument sticking up here. Well, that made me think that Bristol must have been a prosperous city. You can just about tell the prosperity of a city by looking in the cemetery. And I thought, well, it gave me a good opinion of this place, just seeing that big monument. Well, in September, I came up here for the first time, and I've been coming here regularly ever since. And I can say that it's in beautiful shape now. It looks like a park. And you're welcome to come and walk around daylight hours anytime you want. And furthermore, I extend a special invitation to sit down on the bench on which I'm sitting and view the town. There's one of the best views from up here that you can get of the town of Bristol. I was lucky, how lucky I was to get this lot for my own resting place eventually. I'll never be less thankful I am today, and I'll be more thankful as time goes by for the fact that I was able to get this nice big lot here. It's long and slim, but it's good for the purpose. And I come here often myself and sit down and look to the west and see the city that I've devoted the last 60 years to. And yes, I've given the strength of my youth to this city, and here at 85, I'm still trying to give what strength I have now to the good of the city. The big monument I mentioned, which you can see, is to honor the memory of a man whose name was William H. Smith. People called him Uncle Will Smith. They did that back in those days. If they liked somebody and respected him and was older a little bit, they'd call him uncle, and if it was a woman, they'd call him man. Now, Uncle Will's father, Major William Smith, was a soldier veteran of the War of 1812. He lived first in Piney Flats, and I think that is where William H. Smith was born. And then he moved over down near the racetrack and built a brick house. Strangely, about 4 of his 5 sons became brick masons and made their own brick most of the time up until later years. He had one son, G.B. Smith. George Smith became a noted photographer. His name was George Boy Smith because his mother was a boy. And so out of the lot, he became the photographer, and the only one that didn't follow the construction business and mostly making their own brick. They built the old courthouse in Blunteville. And Will, when he came here, Will Smith, he had a good business going, and he built many brick buildings around over town. If you read my column in the paper the last 2 weeks, I've had articles about Dr. John J. Enzer. The house in which he lived is now the Sesco building on the corner of Cherry and 7th. That was Will Smith's work, one of his earlier buildings that he built here. Then a year later, he built Old Pleasant Hill, where I live, and all over, they're all over here. He built the one on the corner of Locust and 6th, which is now a dental office. He built that, and over and around, he built all over town. He prospered pretty good. He had a brick yard where he made his brick down between Broad and Shelby Streets, facing what's now the Volunteer Parkway. At that time, it was 9th Street, and there he made the brick probably for my house. I think he did. And he also made the brick there for the Sesco building. So you see, he did well for the city, and people honored him and respected him. Well, he built what was called Smith's Row, several brick houses side by side in the 900 block of Shelby Street. That slopes up a hill, you know, and so he built his home up on Smith Road. It was probably about the second one up the hill, maybe a third. When I came here, a family lived in it that I knew well and got lots of my city information, my historical information. I got a lot from that person, Aunt Minnie Bridgman. What she didn't know, her father had told her, and her father is buried in this cemetery, incidentally, Mr. Ed Fadley. She was a Fadley before she married the Bridgman. Well, he, as all people do, he grew old and couldn't work as much. He planned to build his own house. He had a fairly good little house down on Main Street, which is now State Street. But he decided he wanted to build a grand house for himself. And so he got the lot where the present U.S. Post Office, old U.S. Post Office building is, in Bristol, Tennessee. It's been restored beautifully in recent years. But that's where he planned to build his final home. But he was growing old at the time, and he couldn't do much work himself, and so he backed down on that. And finally, the U.S. Post Office got the lot, the government got the lot, and put the U.S. Post Office there. Well, it would have been a fine place for a house, all level lot and everything. So he then moved up on Smith Row. He did have several brick houses up there. It had a porch, kind of what they call a wraparound porch on it. I visited there many times when this family lived there, as I knew. Well, he had an ideal place, as you will see in just a minute. He decided to build his own monument in East Hill Cemetery. He got his workers together, and strangely, well, not really strange, but instead of making the brick for it, he ordered the brick for it. He ordered double-pressed, dove-colored brick. And that's fine brick. It's very good. It's better than ordinary brick. And also, he ordered some stone trimmings to go around that. If you could see close up, you'd see it's got a lot of stone trimming on it. And that was what he wanted. Well, he found a stone, and how they ever got it in here, I don't know, but he found a great big stone to make the foundation for it. He wanted to have a sure foundation. And that was put on underneath. Though he was past working at the time, he could still get around some. He brought his men, his workmen. He got the best bricklayer he had, and brought him up here and his helpers. And he would bring a chair every day, by buggy, I guess. There wasn't any cars much in town then. But he would bring his horse and buggy up here and bring a chair. And he would sit in that chair all day long, not just watch for a few minutes or an hour. He would sit in that chair, and the exacting man that he was, he would just about tell him how to lay every brick in that monument he's building for himself. Well, it rose up higher, and it's told to me that he first didn't mean for it to be so high, but it got to looking pretty good to him, and he told his workmen to go ahead. And so I would estimate it's probably about 20 feet high, somewhere from 18 to 20 feet. Trimmed it up beautifully. He was satisfied finally, and he went back home. Well, as I said a while ago, that house would prove valuable to him for its location. For he would sit on that porch and look over here across town and see. I could point his house out now, but I probably couldn't make it known to anybody much, but I can see the roof of it. He'd spent many days in the summertime or when it's pleasant any time, sitting on that porch just admiring the great stone. He said he hoped it would last 100 years. It was built about 1901, and it's still there today. We did have to repair it some a few years ago. Well, I don't know where he pinned it or not. Somebody wrote a verse to put on that monument. And I saw that the first time I was in here in September 1953. And I couldn't think what it might mean. But it's a beautiful little verse. It said, as gently falls a babe to sleep upon his mother's breast, sitting in his easy chair, he fell to heavenly rest. Well, the old lady who lived there knew what that meant. She said yes, he had a habit of getting a newspaper, and going out on that porch and sitting down and read the news, and then when he got finished with that, he'd look long and lovingly toward East Hill and see his beautiful monument standing up here. I can understand that. A flag waves over my lot, put up by friends, Bob White and Joe Blaylock. It's in a little marker right by it. And when Joe showed it to me the first time, he took me way out West State Street. And coming down slope toward here, you could see that flag waving in the air. Well, I was kind of proud of that. And he did that deliberately so he could show me how far it could be seen. Well, sitting there in that chair, he read his paper, and then he leaned back in the chair to study or think about that beautiful monument he had, and going to be there for at least 100 years, he thought. And sitting there in that chair, he just died. So that's where the verse came from. As gently falls a babe to sleep upon his mother's breast, reclining in his easy chair, he fell to heavenly rest. So that's the story of Uncle Will Smith and his monument. Hopefully it will last another 100 years. We spent a lot of money fixing that up, getting it repaired. Some of the stone was falling away, and a few of the bricks had fallen out. But a few years ago, we thought it was worthwhile. I mean, that's probably the best known monument in the whole cemetery. We did put out some money, but we got some special gifts on it, and rebuilt it. Not that we tore it down and rebuilt, but I mean we put repairs. That would be the better word. That's what we actually did. Put repairs on it. So there it stands today, and you can see it from various places around over town. There's other beautiful monuments in here. Come up and see us sometime. If you've never been up here, drive up here. I know people that's lived their life out here in this town and never been up here. But do come and see this cemetery, and while you're here, if you're tired, you're so welcome to sit down on this bench. A lot of people bring their lunch here, office workers and so on, bring their lunches here and eat. And I'm thankful that they don't leave any debris, any trash around. I've never found a piece around this bench. Until we meet again, dear friends, may the best in life be yours.